For every unit of affordable housing that's built, 7 are lost, and over hundreds of people sleeping on our street every night. Yet our city council only approved $16 million on building new affordable homes. Shame, while they continue to give over $400 million every year towards a bloated police budget, almost $60 million to widen and expand roads, and $26 million for fare enforcement. A budget is less about resources and more about priorities, and says a lot about what a city values. And it would seem the city leadership does not value or maintaining more affordable homes as much as they should. This is why we're here before you today to launch our campaign to push the city to double its affordable housing budget. In the past couple of years, our city has not been bold enough. In 2020, we declared a housing emergency, but little has been done. Our goal is to reach people across this city, from Cumberland to Orleans to Centertown to Cart, and to get 10,000 signatures by the next budget cycle to show our council that this proposal has massive, broad support and appeal. And that residents are ready to have their dollars spent on preventative solutions like affordable housing. It's a bold goal, but we know that with our people power and with the strength of our members and our movement that we can do it.
Housing is a human right. That isn't something that should need to be said, but in the midst of the worst housing crisis in modern history, it feels like a radical statement. We have an unchallenged for-profit model that benefits landlords and developers. The tenant class funds the retirements and builds the wealth of the multiple property-owning classes as they themselves increasingly struggle to pay rent and put food on the table. I live in Chinatown Ward, where we have a homeless population and the highest proportion of rooming house residents. They are often members of our community with mental health and substance use challenges and may access the shelter system. Shelters have a place in our society. They should be a temporary response to a crisis situation. But talk to any shelter worker and they'll tell you that the same people occupy a bed for weeks, months, and often years. Shelters in Ottawa are where we essentially warehouse human beings with mental health and substance use challenges in conditions so horrific that many choose to sleep on the streets, assessing it, likely correctly, to be a safer and healthier option. These are people that should simply be housed. Our city representatives for years and decades have failed us over and over and over again. But there are solutions that are within reach and that we can accomplish. The costs to fund shelters, the Ottawa Carleton Detention Centre, paramedics, hospital visits, police responses to our homeless and underhoused population are astounding. In fact, the shelter system and precarious housing often exacerbate the mental health and substance use challenges that lead people to be homeless in the first place. It's hard to address your mental health when you're homeless, and it's hard to quit using drugs when you're sleeping in a rooming house infested with bed bugs and cockroaches. Mental health and substance use challenges under our current system lead to costly EMS calls, hospitalizations, and police responses that are either preventable or don't even help the person in need. These funds easily surpass the cost to simply house these people in the first place. There is no question that we have the funds to ensure that each and every resident of Ottawa has the dignity of a safe and affordable place to call home. The question is, do our municipal politicians have the political will to make it happen?
No. What does transit have to do with housing? Most of the people who rely on transit as their sole means of transportation are in desperate need of affordable, quality housing. The housing challenge in the city and the transit challenge in the city are linked. People who are in need of services are in need of a decent place to live, an easy and safe and accessible way to get around, and right now they get neither. Right now we have a city where those things are not guaranteed. There are huge numbers of people in our city who do not have that privilege. I worked for 5 years at a homeless shelter. We really thought there was a chance of ending homelessness in this city, of having enough housing for everyone. And what has happened since is every single budget we see housing nickel and dime. Every single chance we have to do something better, to do something transformative, we don't take it. We say, what about the landlords? Housing should never be about profit. Housing is about giving people a human right. We really need to make sure we're building dense housing near transit so people can benefit from the service that we have. Yes, we want better service. Yes, we want more service. But we can't just say, okay, these are our only sites for affordable housing. We'll give you a small little pocket here. We need to be talking about affordable housing in every development, making sure that housing providers have the cash to purchase units so that they can have housing in every building, subsidizing it. Figure out ways to add this cash to the city budget so that we are not simply spending $3,000 a month to keep someone who's experiencing homelessness in a motel under horrid conditions. We can have a city that has good transit. We can have a city that has housing for everyone. If we value this, where is it in this budget? We should be spending this money on housing and ensuring that the housing that's available is protected for future generations. The people who are affected are the ones who don't have other choices, and we need to make sure that we make good choices available to them. There's people who work here who care, and there's people who work here who couldn't care less. It's working with the people who care to try and get where we want to go, and if the people who couldn't care less, we're just going to drag them kicking and screaming.
The definition of affordable has become really flexible and problematic. You know, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation is giving huge financing grants to corporate developers, and all they need to do is provide a small number of apartments that are 80% of median market rent. Does anyone know what the average market rent for a one-bedroom in downtown Ottawa is right now? $2,000. Yeah, it's over $2,000 a month. So 80% of that is not affordable. It's not even affordable to me, and I make a good salary at City Hall. It's been a really tough couple of weeks in the neighborhood, I'm not gonna lie. We lost a neighbor about 3 weeks ago who was living with a bunch of people in a rooming house on Catherine Street where the landlord had not paid the hydro. So the hydro had been cut off. And it was a horrendous condition. It was actually such a horrible rooming house, the city had to go in and shut it down. But people decided to squat there. They stayed because they had no other place to go. And as Laura and Emily said, they didn't want to go into the shelter system. They were fearful of the shelter system. They felt that this was a better alternative. And in the middle of that heat wave about 3 weeks ago, a woman that we were trying to find housing for, she died of fever and heat exhaustion, which is horrifying. Yeah, shame, right? And so the thing that is so horrendous to me is when I have people who come and tell me about their horrible living conditions, if they are lucky to have housing, I don't have anywhere else to send them. So people are staying in really, really horrible conditions because they have no other place to go, or they're choosing to set up encampments because they don't feel that the shelter system is safe. A huge part of the blame for the lack of affordable housing that we have in our city, for the 12,000 families that are on the wait list for rent geared to income housing, is because the federal government pulled out of building public housing in the 90s. So for 30 years, our system has been starved of the kind of funding that we need to really build affordable housing to meet the need. But then another thing happened, which is that cities kept saying, well, we can't do it. Like, we can't do it, we don't have the support, so we're just not going to do it. And now we have a homelessness and a housing crisis that's worse than it's ever been. I agree with Horizon. The city needs to start showing ambition. When we show that ambition, it attracts funding from other levels of government. But I also have to tell you, please, when it comes to budget season, please let your representative know that you're okay with raising taxes to make sure that people have a place to live. Taxes are such a dirty word, but this is how we have an equitable society. We need to put more money, more of our own money, into supporting everyone in our neighborhood, because when we support the most vulnerable people, our entire community thrives. Next week at our Community Services Committee meeting, 2 proposals that the community fought so hard for. We opened these overflow shelters during COVID in community centers across the city to ensure physical distancing, but it's 3 years later and they're still full, and we still have people sleeping on gymnasium floors, which is unacceptable. So I know that a proposal is coming forward to convert and to build that housing from shelter spaces into permanent affordable housing with wraparound supports, which is what we need. I know Emily spoke about a lot of the challenges with addiction and mental health that happens when people don't have homes. Well, we're finally going to see the proposal for a non-police crisis intervention team that's going to provide a real alternative, so we have someone else to call when our neighbors are struggling. Because the thing that worries me is the more people that are unhoused, the more people that are struggling with mental health and addiction, the longer it goes untreated and people are not treated with human dignity, it also increases the demand for more policing because people become fearful when other individuals are struggling. But we know that the best way to help our neighbors is to provide housing, mental health supports, and frontline services. So thank you.
Being unable to access housing that you could ever dream of affording is something that disproportionately affects young people and students. Students it is impacting the hardest are queer, are racialized, are disabled, and are from lower class socioeconomic backgrounds. Landlords are using the inexperience of young people when it comes to finding a place to live to include illegal and predatory clauses in rental agreements, unlawfully collecting personal information, and asking for deposits larger than the legal maximum. Even the housing that is available, when you manage to afford it, amongst drastic cuts to OSAP, ODSP, and balancing your education with a part-time job, is of poor quality. The fact is, my generation will never get to own a home. I will never own a home. A milestone that has defined Canadian life for decades is not something that most people my age will ever get to experience. Despite this, we still need to live somewhere. And we'd like to still be able to live in Ottawa. So let's join together and demand that action is taken to ensure that people like me can continue to live in the city we grew up. Thank you.